But first, important news if you have any student loan debt to pay back. You might remember that as part of the federal response to COVID, the government paused student loan repayment for 3 years. And last fall, borrowers had to begin making payments again. But there was a buffer, a bit of a grace period that let people get back into the habit of making those payments. Now that safety net is going away. So starting today, the nearly 30 million borrowers across the country could once again incur late fees, and it could hurt your credit score. So here with more on what you need to know is Sabrina Calazans, Managing Director of the Student Debt Crisis Center. Welcome, Sabrina.
Thanks for having me, Sasha-Ann.
Also here in studio is Rich Hayes, who's Executive Director of Financial Aid and Scholarships at UIC. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm curious, Rich, how are you wrapping your head around these changes?
I would say the main thing we want to do is just prepare our students and our borrowers for what's to come. And that's being more informed about how to navigate this new norm of going into repayment. A lot of good things that happened with COVID was that they paused the payments. They gave them a buffer.
Yeah.
They didn't post any delinquent things on their credit report.
Which is huge.
Even if they didn't pay. And that was great. Now, starting today, they're going to do that. So if you miss a payment, they're going to say you missed a payment. They're not going to give you those buffers anymore. And then you have to go back and navigate how you're going to pay these loan backs, even for students who are the most vulnerable borrowers, even for students who still haven't recovered from the pandemic.
Yeah. Same question to you, Sabrina. I mean, how are you wrapping your mind around this right now? What's top of mind today?
Yeah, so for us at Student Debt Crisis Center, we deal with a lot of folks of all ages. And what we often hear in the news or the rhetoric around student debt is that this is solely a young person's issue. And that is not the case at all. That tends to be that middle-aged to older folks do carry the brunt of student debt in America. And so we see folks that are trying to retire or plan for that, older folks, that just want to, retire, plan for their future, parents who are trying to send their children off to school who still have their own student debt as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who feel like the student debt is trapping them. And just before I got on, I did get confirmation from the Department of Education that one of these programs that is set to end today, the Fresh Start program, is actually going to be extended very, very shortly until October 2nd at 3 a.m. Eastern, because there is a problem with the website. A lot of folks are unable to access it. So
A technical issue.
Unfortunately so, yes.
Yeah, and so we'll dig into that in just a moment to catch some folks up who may not know exactly what Fresh Start is and what it's meant to do. But before we do all of that, I want you to just walk us through the effect that this so-called on-ramp program had, Sabrina. So the 1-year grace period that Rich alluded to, where people they weren't getting penalized for late payments. Has it been helpful to ease borrowers back into this life of paying back student debt?
Absolutely. For a lot of folks who don't know, the on-ramp program came as an immediate creation of after the Supreme Court struck down the original plan to cancel student debt. So after that happened, they said payments are coming back on, but we know a lot of folks are still struggling as a result of the pandemic. So this grace period was a lifeline for millions of folks. As Rich said, it prevented people from entering default status, which means being reported to collection agencies and credit bureaus. There's a lot of negative consequences that come with falling into default and delinquency. And so this on-ramp is truly a protective period for millions of people across the country.
Mm-hmm. Late fees are resuming. I mean, and while they are not high, talk about the effect that could have on someone struggling to pay their loans.
Right. If these late fees are accumulating, you'll see your balance grow. That triggers people's, stress and anxiety. And there's already so many people struggling financially across the country. And this is just one more thing that is top of mind. And so it is definitely concerning to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Credit bureaus will now be told if someone's 90 days late on making their payment. I mean, again, Rich, huge consequences on someone's credit.
Yeah. I think right now we have a lot of people who are living in survival. And when you're living in survival, the last thing you want to do is worry about a student loan. You're worrying about how you're going to eat, how you're going to pay for your rent, how you're going to pay for your bills, how you're going to take care of your children. And so when you look at those variables, not having to worry about student loans was just a great thing for students across the nation. Now that we're getting back into that norm of, hey, this is what's going to happen to your credit, this is what's going to happen to your account, more balances, and it's this funny thing that they say that being poor costs more.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What a terrible saying.
Yes.
But it's so true. After 270 days, Sabrina, of not making payments, a borrower can go into default and face collections. Just walk us through that process. What does it look like?
Yeah, so that includes your entire unpaid loan balance and interest becoming due immediately. You won't be able to receive deferments or forbearances. You won't be eligible for more federal student aid. This is going to severely damage your credit score and make it very difficult for you to get any other sort of loan. They're also able to withhold your official transcript, but also the worst part here, and we've heard this from so many folks, is that your tax refunds and your wages may be garnished. So you can see like 15 to 20% of your wages garnished in a paycheck. From someone who's already struggling and who falls into default, to then have their wages garnished, it feels immoral at that point to see this sort of thing happen.
Yeah, I mean, talk about the powerful tools that the federal government has at its disposal, right? As you said, the Education Department and federal guarantee agencies, they can garnish someone's wages, and this is without getting a court order. And then
Correct.
Just with the tax refunds that you mentioned, they can place borrowers in the Treasury Offset Program. This allows the government to intercept tax refunds and seize portions of federal benefits like Social Security benefits in some cases, again, without that court order. So, Rich, another change moving forward that Sabrina has mentioned now is being extended, right, which is Fresh Start. Catch us up. Fresh Start was a relief program it took people who were in default before the pandemic out of default and into repayment, and just sort of allowed them to potentially take out new loans and go back to school and finish degrees. Is that right?
Yeah. So the Fresh Start program was what it was, a fresh start. So students, normally if you went into default, you have to go through one or two tracks. That's either rehabilitation, where you have to get on a 6-month payment plan, make sure you make payments on time to come out of default. The other option is doing a consolidation of all your loans into a new loan that starts you back into repayment. With Fresh Start, you're able to go back to school. You're able to send a letter to the school, say, hey, I want to go back. You fill out an application, takes about 4 to 6 weeks to process, and then it immediately puts you back into repayment on the standard 10-year repayment plan. And so students was able to take advantage of having their loans updated to where they were in repayment status instead of being in delinquency or collection status. Mm-hmm. They also was able to take advantage of federal aid if they wanted to go back to school and get Pell Grant. MAP grant for the state of Illinois, take out any additional federal loans. So they had those benefits now that they was not in default. Now with the Fresh Start program going away, they have to go back to that normal 1 or 2 tracks, either through rehabilitation or through consolidating their loans. But this is the kicker. Students also defaulted on the consolidated loan. So if you already defaulted on that consolidated loan, then you can't go back and reconsolidate the same loan unless you have new loans to put into one bunch. So that's what we're dealing with here is they're losing a lot of benefits with that Fresh Start.
And Sabrina, remind us, how long right now does it say that they are extended until the Fresh Start?
So it looks like the deadline is going through October 2nd at 3 a.m. Eastern. That is the new deadline.
Fresh Start, Rich, it could also help move people to income-driven repayment loan forgiveness programs. So that we're clear, what are those programs and how did they work?
So income-driven repayment program is a payment plan that was based on your income. And so a lot of people didn't make a lot of money. So if you had a low income, that means that you could potentially have a payment plan of 0. Also, what the government came out with, which is currently tied up in legal issues right now, is the SAVE plan, where a student can get on an income-driven repayment plan, and if they stay on that payment plan for a certain amount of time, they'll be able to forgive the rest of their loan. So let's say they pay for 10 years under that SAVE plan. What's ever left after that, it's immediately forgiven, right? For the current IDR plans, and I'm saying IDR for income-driven repayment plans, it's about 20 to 25 years. So they have to go back into those normal tracks of those IDR plans. But with Fresh Start, they can also qualify for that SAVE program, which right now is on pause because we got some people that don't agree with student loan forgiveness.
As if the rest of this isn't complicated enough, right,
Exactly.
Rich? So you're at
Right.
UIC now, but I understand you used to be at city colleges, and that's kind of where you saw Fresh Start really sort of take impact. Talk about that. Like, how many students were applying for this?
So when I was at City College of Chicago, I was the Associate Vice Chancellor for Financial Aid and Scholarships for the district. And the students we saw was not necessarily new students. These were students coming back to get new credentials, middle-aged students. And so of a student base of about 40,000 students, we saw about 10% of that student base that was taking advantage of coming back to school, getting into that Fresh Start program and taking a shorter route to getting their loans put into a good status. And so it was very critical because at city colleges, they have a lot, and I mean a lot of low-income students.
Mm-hmm.
And because they have those low-income students, those students can't afford to, be able to make that payment on that payment plan and survive. That's why they like the tuition over there. It was only $17.52 for full time. So that coupled with a Fresh Start program was critical to them moving ahead
Absolutely.
and getting past the pandemic.
If you're just tuning in, this is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and starting today, student loan relief programs end for 30 million borrowers across the country. So we're getting the details from Sabrina Calazans, who's Managing Director of the Student Debt Crisis Center, and Rich Hayes, who's Executive Director of Financial Aid and Scholarships here at UIC. So Sabrina, we got to remember that there are new borrowers who aren't familiar with the consequences that existed before the pandemic. What would you say is important to share with those people right now?
Yeah, so for folks who are getting into this, who have never made a payment or are just looking to learn more, my go-to tip is to go to studentaid.gov. Studentaid.gov is where you will have an account. You will have a dashboard. On that dashboard, you will find all of your information. You will see your loan balance on there. You will see who your loan servicer is, when your bill is due, what plan you're currently enrolled in. You can find all of that information. It's like a one-stop shop. For folks who want to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, an IDR plan, I believe the applications as of this morning are now back online. So folks can go to studentaid.gov, apply for a repayment plan if you want to try and lower your monthly payment to prevent yourself from falling into delinquency and default.
Mm-hmm.
Studentaid.gov is the best place for folks to go to.
So that's a new development that you just shared, because as far as I knew, up until an hour ago at least, the online portal was down, right? And
Yes,
people had to
a lot
submit
has
paper
changed.
applications.
Yep. A lot has changed within the last couple of hours. We got confirmation from Ed as well that the applications for income-driven repayment plans and consolidation are now back online. And if for some reason it comes offline again, because we are in the middle of litigation, folks are always able to send in a paper application to make sure that they get enrolled into that plan.
Those income-driven repayment plans, Rich, do they still accrue interest?
Yes. Yes, they still accrue interest, just like any of the other payment plans.
Okay.
The cool thing about the SAVE plan is the interest was a lot less. But right now, as we said, it's tied up in litigation, so you can't apply for the SAVE plan right now. But for the other ones, you can. And what I would recommend, same as my colleague said, is that go to studentaid.gov. And I think most important, stay in contact with your guarantee and loan servicers. They will work with you. But again, if you go 270 days and you don't say a word, you don't talk to anyone, they're going to assume like, okay, you don't want to talk to us, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to throw you into
it's going to be much harder to try to go backwards and get help. The SAVE program, remind us what that is again?
The SAVE program was a income-driven repayment option that is currently tied up in litigation. They brought it about from the Biden administration, and with that plan, it was lower interest rates on that repayment plan, and then student loan borrowers would be able to pretty much get their loans forgiven after making payments for 10 to 25 years.
I see.
So students either had a zero, and a lot of students had less than $50 monthly payment compared to thousands of dollars in a monthly payment.
That's a big difference. Huge difference. Well, we just mentioned litigation there, Sabrina. We know President Biden's loan forgiveness programs, they're tied up in court right now. Remind us what's ahead for those initiatives.
Yes, so the SAVE plan was sued by attorneys generals in multiple states. And so that we are waiting to hear from the Eighth Circuit Court. Essentially, this has been bouncing around from court to court. It went to the Supreme Court, and they said, we're going to toss it back down to the Eighth Circuit Court. And now they have to rule on that before we believe it's going to get sent back to the Supreme Court. So we can see potentially this heading to the Supreme Court and getting a result next year. So this is months to come where borrowers are going to be in limbo.
Yeah.
Now, the other lawsuit is tied to President Biden's Plan B student debt cancellation. Now, this is more targeted relief, and this is for folks who owe more than they originally borrowed, are eligible for loan forgiveness but are not enrolled in a certain program, who have been in repayment for 20 or 25 years, or were enrolled in low financial value programs. These are folks that should have already had their loan canceled, but for some reason did not. This was sued as well by the same attorneys general that sued against the student debt cancellation. Right now, there has been a temporary restraining order filed and in place so that nothing can be done, that the debt cannot be removed from people's accounts. It's basically on pause as well. But this is very unprecedented because the final rules were not released yet for this program. And also the attorneys general came and brought this forward with help from one of the student loan servicers that services the federal student loan portfolio, Mohila, which is notorious for being one of the worst student loan servicers. So this is just very controversial. This is harming millions of borrowers across the country who could have received relief. It would have helped 25 million people.
What's going through your mind, Rich?
When she said Mohila, I couldn't do nothing but laugh because I had Mohila as a student loan servicer as well, and they was kind of brutal. But to her point, I think that it's interesting that we live in a society where we can send millions of dollars for aid, where we can do all these other things, but we can't help our student loan borrowers who all they wanted to do was go to school, get an education like they was told to. They had to borrow, and then they ran into a pandemic that shut the world down, and now they're just trying to find a way to bounce back. And not extending these conveniences is just not, fair in a sense to people who's just trying to find a way to make it.
Before we go, recap real quick, Sabrina, where can borrowers get more information?
To learn more about all of these programs and what you can be eligible for, you can go to studentaid.gov.
That's Sabrina Calazans, who's Managing Director of the Student Debt Crisis Center, and Rich Hayes, who's Executive Director of Financial Aid and Scholarships at UIC. Thank you both so much.